lot of folks out there are certainly very, very familiar with Bob Parsons, the wildly successful businessman, entrepreneur, self-made billionaire, of course, founder of GoDaddy. And, but I think the side that they may not know about you is, the time that you spent in Vietnam and how that experience would end up, for better, worse, otherwise end up shaping a good majority of your adulthood life and leading you to where you are here today. So if you wouldn't mind, sir, maybe starting with that, talking about your experience there in Vietnam, some of what you experienced, saw, and how that would impact the person that you became, again, to the majority of your adult life.
Well, there's positives and negatives there, David. If to give you a little bit of background, I enlisted when I was 17. I was not a great student in school. I failed I failed the 5th grade, but because of an unusual series of events, to say the least, I didn't have to repeat it. So I was able to go into the 6th grade with probably 4th grade skills. Got that going for me, brother. And, every year, whether I graduated or not was a photo finish. And when I was a senior in high school, I was not doing well at all. I expected that my grades wouldn't be sufficient enough to graduate. And I had a couple buddies come up to me after gym one day. I think it was in March, and they said, what are you going to do after high school, Bob? And I said, well, I think I'm gonna still be here. And they said, well, we're going to go down and talk to the Marine Corps recruiter on Conklin Street. You got any interest in going with you? And I said, count me in. So, it wasn't something I had thought about until, I talked to my 2 buddies, but I went with them, and the 3 of us wound up joining. And so I came back, and I was 17 then, so my mother had to sign the papers. And when I got my orders, when I got my orders, I showed them to all my teachers, and they all passed me. And now this is back in 1968. Okay. Now let me put the war in perspective. Okay. Now, during the war in Afghanistan, all right, during a typical week, the casualties on both sides, killed and wounded, run about 150 a week. In Vietnam, when I enlisted, that was about 33,000 a week. So I mean, this was a righteous war. If you look at the Marine Corps' casualties over there, the Marine Corps took more casualties in the Vietnam War than it did in World War I and II combined. So I mean, brother, this was wow. A righteous war. I mean, it was rocking and rolling. So anyhow, so we enlisted. We didn't report to boot camp till August, and then when we came back and had boot leave, and then went over on our tour, I was there. When I got there, I was 18 in a couple months. I was one of the youngest guys in a platoon, if not the youngest, and I found out that the guy in my squad, that was a new squad leader, it was a senior man, had been there for 6 weeks. Everybody else left, was either killed or wounded.
Right.
So I seen my first when I seen my first combat, I wasn't with them but 4 hours. And
wow.
Yeah. So during the first night, one of our brothers was hurt horrifically. During the next night, our point man hit a trap and blew his legs to shreds. I had to I helped carry him back about a mile and a half to the medevac point. And and that's the way it went. Right. I lasted 1 month, 30 days, 31 days maybe. And I was walking on a point team and going through a village at night and hit a tripwire. It was attached to a North Vietnamese hand grenade, and that I caught shrapnel both legs, left elbow, and was medevac to Japan. And then from there, after I recuperated in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, if you were wounded, I think you could opt out of combat, and the Marine Corps 3 times, of course, right? And the other, so I received orders back to the bush, and on the way back, I was through a series of events. I was reassigned to military intelligence, and when military Marine Corps intelligence, and when you think about the my academic credentials at that point, I was exactly the kind of guy they were looking for. It's like, what am I doing in Marine Corps intelligence? So anyhow, eventually I rotated home. I was back in Viet Nam many times, never in combat. The rocket attacks coming in and that sort of thing with the sirens. I mean, I felt what it was like to run down a tarmac so fast that I'm pretty sure my feet never touched the ground. Right now, when I came back, and I worked as a laborer in a steel mill for about a year, and then I went to the University of Baltimore. I majored in accounting, and believe it or not, because nobody back then believed it, I graduated magna cum laude and passed CPA exams first time, and was able to start a few businesses. I've started 3 now that debuted on the Inc. 5000 list low.
Right.
And so I wouldn't have done any of this without the Marine Corps. Marine Corps turned me around, buddy. I mean, they taught me everything. They taught me discipline, responsibility, all that. And, I owe them everything I've ever accomplished. Now that's on the good side.
Right.
On the negative side, I came home with a case of PTSD to beat the band.
And understandable.
Yeah. Now back then, we didn't even know nobody even talked about PTSD. The guys in World War II and Korea called it shell shock. And there was the most extreme cases of it. So, I never knew that I had it. And I thought, well, I was only in combat for a month, probably, certainly, when I found out about PTSD. And then as time went on, I became aware I had a pretty righteous case of it. The Bob Parsons that came home was very different than the one that went over. Guy went over, like being around people, nothing much bothered him, pretty gregarious, liked going places, just easygoing, happy as a lark. The guy that came back, not so much. He was a quick temper. I didn't like being around people, didn't want to go to any events, so I always wanted to be by myself. Depressed,
right?
All the typical symptoms of PTSD. Now, my PTSD most certainly cost me 2 marriages. The crazy part is probably one of the reasons why I was so successful, because I buried myself in my work, which was how I was able to get, to kind of go on. Right. But I'm now married to my third and final wife, who was the love of my life. And she, in discussing with her, I got this Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. Yeah. And my guess is you've heard that a lot.
Of course. Yes.
Oh, man, what a game changer. What a good job Michael did. So I read that, and then I talked to my wife, and I said to her, I've never done anything like this. I'd like to try it. And so she had me hooked up with 2 people that kind of treat vets under the radar. Within 2 weeks, told me I didn't have a problem. Bang. Right. So I got together with them in Hawaii, and over 4 days, I did guided therapy using psychedelics. Now, the important thing to notice when you're being treated for anything like this with psychedelics is psychedelics play an important role in it. They very difficult to do it without them.
Right.
Matter of fact, it takes forever to do it without them. But with them, with the right guided therapy, I mean, it is the cure. So, during the first day, I took ayahuasca, and whoa, yeah, that was
just jump right into ayahuasca, not even kind of setting yourself up through microdosing, mushrooms, or anything. It was just bam, right into ayahuasca.
Oh well, I mean, these guys that treated me,
Right.
they had to get it done and go on. Right.
Right.
So this wasn't any long drawn out process. The second day it was mushrooms.
Okay.
Psychedelic mushrooms. At that time I didn't even know what ayahuasca was. They told me, South American vine it's made from. And they told me about it. I said, how'd they ever figure that out? They said, well, the natives down there told them that the trees told them how to do it.
Hmm.
Okay. I kind of believe it. All right. Now the day I took mushrooms, the guy made this tea with mushrooms, and I don't know what kind to this day, but he said to me, he goes, you're probably only going to need 1 cup because I made it strong. Well, I drank the first cup. Matter of fact, long story short, drank all 3 cups and ate the tea bags.
Right.
And I'm sure you always do that, right?
Yeah, of course.
There you go. So anyhow, that was quite an experience. And then the third day I took off. And on the third day when I took off, I went and played 9 holes of golf with Renee, my wife. And I remember, I mean, it felt like the trees and the bushes knew I was there. I never putted so good in all my life. It was like the green was saying, hit it here, Bobby. And I would, I made every putt. I've never putted like that since. And the third day, it was good old fashioned LSD.
Okay.
And, after it was done, and I went back to work in Arizona. The people that I work with, they couldn't believe the change in me. And I never told them what I did. They go, "What happened to him? He's so nice. He listens. Nothing bothers him, right? He says such nice things now, right?" Because I was like I was again, like before the war, right? I was like I was before the war, and even my son told his wife, he goes, "Man, Dad is so different." And he said, "Man, he's calling more now, and he's just so nice and happy." And he says, "I'm worried that he found out he's going to die soon." And then so anyhow, I was like I was before the war, wanted to go places again, wanted to be around people.
Right.
Here's the deal. It had been 49 years since the war. And thanks to psychedelics and the counseling with it, I finally came home, David.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And, I love that, finding your way back home. Took a while, but you made it there. And, you say psychedelics through counseling, we also use the term psychedelic assisted therapy. I want to shed some light on that because I think that's important, especially out there for folks, especially those that are somewhat skeptical over psychedelics. How important is the element of therapy, of counseling? Because the way I've always looked at it, Bob, is, psychedelics alone are not the silver bullet. They're not going to cure depression, PTSD, addiction, anything like that. But if you use it wisely and use it as a key to unlock certain parts of yourself that maybe you've repressed or that you've locked away, in your case, perhaps locking away that trauma that you experienced in Viet Nam, it allows you to confront it in a manner that allows you to identify where the issues exist and then go head to head with them. Would you say that that's sort of how things played out for you? And I want you to share that because I think it's important that people understand that it's not just the psychedelics, but it's the psychedelics in combination with the right therapy and the right counseling.
Well, and that is 100% true. And the other thing is that when you're going through your guided therapy with psychedelic, people, sometimes people say, well, man, it was a lot of fun. At least you're using psychedelics. No, because see, you're dealing with all the stuff that caused the PTSD, right? Or whatever it is, the anxiety, whatever it is that the individual's dealing with, and it's hard. And you sometimes feel like afterwards, man, I don't want to do that again. But you got to do it. You got to go through it because that's what causes the healing, right? Now, what the psychedelics do is they make you willing to listen, willing to bring it up, and then open to dealing with it. And so it's like the psychedelics and the therapy. It's like a car. What's more important, the engine or the gasoline? Well, we're not talking about electric cars,
right? No,
but obviously it's both of them. So there you
Absolutely.
go.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. There's no question about it.
Uh-huh.
And Bob, I mean, you're one of the lucky few out there that were able to find your way home. Unfortunately, the reality of it is far too many of our brave servicemen and women come home. Well, they come home, but they never find their way home, so to speak. And a lot of that has to do with a lack of resources, a lack of framework in place to help them sort of confront the trauma that they experienced while in service. What do you think, needs to happen here? I mean, I know a big part of your own mission here is to try to spread the word of, your experience, your healing, in the hopes, of course, that this is something that other people out there that have perhaps experiencing the same thing that you are can discover. But what needs to happen to bring this to the masses here so that, again, more people can find their way home?
Well, there's a few things. The first thing, it's got to be available, right? And it's got to be available, and it's got to be provided by people that know what they're doing. Right. Because, I would think if you're with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and you take a hero's dose of any of this stuff, can go sideways.
Right.
And, the one thing you don't want to be is worse than you were before you did it. And if you're with the experienced people, especially experienced and trained therapists, that's not going to happen. So that's important. The second thing is it's got to be available, and read that as legal, right? And I think if those two things are present, what we're looking at, and the best word I can use for it is renaissance.
Yeah.
I mean, we are looking at a renaissance in this country that, if we're smart enough to really, kind of push this out, right? It's going to be incredible. I mean, and some of the things are, there's, if you go out, you just talk to people,
right?
And you say, how you doing? Anything bothering you? And they're open with you. A lot of pain in this world. A lot of pain, David. And, especially from PTSD and, people in prison, all the agony and the hate and all that shit there. With MDMA, which I'm pretty active in helping fund their field trials and to provide the FDA with the information that it needs in order to get it approved. That's a game changer. What we found with the field trials is off the hook. For example, in the third field trials, I think it is 67% of the people with treatment-resistant PTSD. That means counseling didn't work at all.
Yeah.
Right? Treatment-resistant PTSD, right? After 3 sessions of therapy are completely cured. Now think about that.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah. Now, we think, you sit down with a trained therapist, you're in for the long haul, baby.
Right.
But, not with MDMA, at least with what we've found. Now, I haven't done that yet.
Right. Yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So on the subject of MDMA, we know MAPS is making, some terrific progress, with the clinical trials they've got going on with MDMA. There is hope, at least here, within the psychedelic sector and community, that the FDA may grant its approval, sometime next year. What are your general thoughts on, how do you feel that would create a domino effect if you get MDA to a point where the FDA is able to clear it? Do you think that sets off a domino effect for other psychedelics to perhaps become legal for therapeutic use?
Yeah, sure. I do. And, once, right now, the thing that is holding this back is, you and I both know, fear of the dark.
Yeah.
Fear of the dark, because, people knew what we knew, right? And the government knew what we know, be approved.
Right.
Because, who doesn't want our veterans not to have PTSD? Who doesn't want us not to have 22 veterans a day taking their lives, right? That's terrible after everything they've done for the country.
I know.
Right? Yeah, and then all the other stuff, people that are trafficked, people who fall on the wrong side of, the wrong side of a crime, and, whatever that horrific thing is, people in prison.
Right.
Now, yeah, people in prison for the first time in the history. If we were treating them with psychedelics, we'd be having people come in. It would take all the agony and shit at it that they're dealing with. And, what, it's easy to think that people in prison are just bad people.
Right.
A dear friend of mine, Andrea Bocelli, he told me, he goes, Bob, there's a reason I don't believe in the death penalty. And he says, the reason is because these people are a product of how they were raised. Mm-hmm. And he says, if you could look at their childhood, it's horrific usually. He goes, think of somebody that brings home a little puppy, right? And they can treat that puppy with love and kindness, and it'll grow up to be a wonderful, wonderful animal. But if they beat it and abuse it, it'll be mean and it'll bite and it'll never want to, right. that sort of thing. He says it's the same thing with people. So, society needs to protect itself, but just think if you can turn it around,
Right.
Psychedelics have the promise of doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to circle back to, something that you mentioned, in terms of it being a renaissance. And, I do feel that we are experiencing something here. My general opinion on a renaissance is it's only really an effective renaissance if it actually has a positive impact on everyone. And I'm talking about folks from, marginalized communities, which is why I'm glad you brought up the prison system, because I think if psychedelics and the true potential is really going to be unlocked here for society, we have to make sure that everyone is included. And I know, you've donated hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of your life here. And I know you're also getting involved here in terms of trying to ensure that there is a framework for psychedelics and psychedelic healing. I know with the University of Baltimore, and trying to make sure that individuals from Black communities are also provided with a framework so that they too will have access to this. So I want to talk a little bit about that and how important is it to be having these conversations now about how we're including everyone versus just the upper elite of society that, of course, is going to have no problem accessing and affording this. But what are we doing for the folks in, again, marginalized, lower socioeconomic communities?
Well, you're right. We got to reach out to them. We got to include them. I'm working with the University of Baltimore, and President Kurt Schmoke there, who's a dear friend of mine, used to be the mayor of Baltimore, and what we want to do is provide a framework where we can train, therapists, but especially therapists of color.
Yes.
All right. And, I would think that it is the rare white person, if there is such a person, that knows what it's like to be Black in America.
Right.
I don't think so.
No.
All right. No. But, like, for example, I had a Black therapist tell me, he goes, you got to think about this. Now, a lot of times if a white person gets stopped with a small amount of drugs, whatever the hell it is, a lot of times they just get a slap on the wrist and, we're done. He goes, Black man goes to jail.
Yeah.
Right. And so as a result of that, where's the last place you want to be, brother? The last place you want to be is in jail. I mean, you talk about a bad party.
Right.
Yeah. So, so they'd be very reluctant to even try it. Right. So it has to be legal, and you have to reach out to them, and you have to explain it, what's happening. And it has to be by people they know and trust, which is their own therapist. Absolutely. Right. So that's why it's important to do that. And that's why it's important to get a good, that's why it's important to get a head start on it.
Yeah, it's very important. It's also why we here at Psychedelic Spotlight, we support Black People Trip and Robin Devine and her mission there, doing the same thing, trying to bring psychedelic focused education to individuals within the Black community. And it's so important because we got to start now if that change is going to happen, if this framework is going to be developed. So really happy to hear, your side of that as well. And, as we look to kind of wrap things up here, Bob, I want to circle back to also something that, you mentioned in a previous interview that I had the opportunity to listen to. And it's the story that you shared about your mom. And, sharing the fact that for the most of her life, she was not an affectionate person, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that she grew up with a father that, as you put it, was an abusive alcoholic. And that really resonated with me because as I've been very open about, my own story, my father, who was an alcoholic and passed away at the age of 59 after a very long and painful battle with his alcoholism and depression, that story stood out. And it just reminded me, Bob, of how important it is for individuals like yourself who have such a large public platform to be willing and open to sharing your story, to putting yourself out there. And talking about this is very important because it engages other people within society to start talking about it as well. How have you found your story being received out there when talking about psychedelics and your healing experience? How have people perceived it? How have people been responsive to it so far?
90, not everybody, but 99% of them have, been very receptive and very positive about it. And, and the other 1% are people that, picture that little puppy that was raised, that was raised cruelly, right? They're just not in a position to be that way. At least that's what I like to think. To tell you the story about, do you mind if I tell the story about?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. My mother, no, she was something else, but she was the smartest woman I know. But she just never had a lot of faith in herself, and and it all stemmed from when she was a kid, she could do no right, and she when her father was used to make barrels, and he was a cooper. That's it called. It's a lost art now, I think. And so he would come home on many nights, 4 sheets to the wind, and she had 7 siblings, and he would pull her out, always her, beat the living shit out of her. And and this happened again and again and again and again. So when she grew up, she broke the cycle of abuse because, my sister studies genealogy. She found out that mom's father, when he grew up, well, he was raised by his grandmother. She was brutal to him and on and on and on. So my mom, to her credit, she never abused us. She broke the cycle, baby. Right. And God bless her. But if I had to think back and somebody said, what is the most loving time you remember with your mother? I don't remember one time because she had no love in her. So she passed when she was 94. She passed 5 years ago, and one night after she passed, I was at my house in Hawaii, and I had this dream. It was it was about 3 a.m, and I know it was 3 a.m because after the dream, I woke up and looked at the clock. That's what time it was. And this thing was, as real as I'm sitting here talking to you now. And I walk into this room, and Mom was laying on the couch, and she sees me, and she gets up, and she comes over to me, and she goes, "Hi, Rob." She goes, "Can I have a hug and a kiss?" And I go, "Oh, sure you can, Mom." So I give her a hug and a kiss, and she says, "I love you." Wow. Then she goes, "Can I have another one?" I go, "Sure you can, Mom." Same thing, right? And then I look down, look up, she's gone. So, and this was right after I was treated with psychedelics, and month or so. And so I get up that morning, and my brother calls me, and he goes, "You know what today is?" I said, "Yeah, what?" And he goes, "It's Mom's birthday." And to me, she came back.
Yeah.
And she told me that. And I'll tell you what, that's what I choose to believe. And it's beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Wow, I got chills. That is a beautiful story, Bob. It really is. And it's almost as if, in many ways, psychedelics helps tune you into a frequency, so to speak, that maybe you otherwise can't tune into. And it's a frequency that allows you to be more receptive to yourself, to life, to love, and things of that sort. And I'm wondering, do you, and I don't want to get too hippie-ish or whatever with this, but, do you foresee a world where if psychedelics are more readily available, and, whether it's recreational, medicinal, but where psychedelics are more readily available, a world that is more in tune with itself, a society that is discovered more peace? Do you think that, or is that just too much of a dystopian type, future that is unrealistic? I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
You know what? It is my total hope that first, I believe it will happen. Psychedelics will be the tool that we use to get there. And it is my hope that I'll be alive to see it.
Yeah.
So there you go, brother.
That's beautiful. And, again, I thank you so much for the work that you were doing, sharing your story, putting yourself out there. I understand how important it is. And we're going to get there because of people like you. So thank you again, Bob. This has been fantastic. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to connect. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and sharing more. This has been fantastic.
All right, buddy. Hey, David, thanks for reaching out to me. And been a real pleasure. And I wish you all the best this life has to offer, brother.
Likewise. Thank you so much.